My daughter forgot to mute her phone, and I heard her mother-in-law say, "Hope he's not coming to the wedding. No room for a man built like a truck." My daughter laughed and said, "Your wish is my command." I said nothing, just made 2 calls, and by the time the wedding day arrived, it was called off. I, 52M, never thought the worst betrayal of my life would come from my own daughter. But here we are, 3 weeks after what should have been her wedding day, and I'm finally ready to tell this story. Let me start from the beginning. I raised my daughter alone after my wife passed away when she was only 6. Cancer took her mother in 8 brutal months, and I watched my little girl grow up without the woman who should have taught her everything. I worked double shifts as a construction foreman to give her the life she deserved. Every recital, every parent-teacher conference, every late-night homework session, I was there. I gave up dating, gave up my social life, gave up everything to be the father she needed. I'm a big guy, always have been. 6'4", broad shoulders, hands like sledgehammers from 28 years in construction. My late wife used to joke that I was built like the buildings I helped construct, solid, dependable, immovable. After she died, I let myself go a bit. Grief does that. I put on weight, stopped caring about how I looked. My daughter never said anything. She'd hug me tight and tell me I gave the best bear hugs in the world. 3 months ago, she got engaged. The guy seemed decent enough, worked in finance, came from money, had that polished look that made me feel like a caveman in comparison. I was happy for her, genuinely happy. His mother, though, was a different story. From the first family dinner, I could feel her eyes on me, that subtle judgment people think they're hiding. The way she'd pause before shaking my hand, the tight smile when I'd speak, the gentle suggestions about the wedding venue needing to accommodate all body types. I ignored it. I've dealt with worse. Construction sites aren't exactly havens of sensitivity, and I grew thick skin years ago. But there was something about the way my daughter started looking at me after that dinner. Something had shifted. The wedding planning consumed the next 2 months. I offered to pay for half, pulled out the savings I'd been building since she was born. The future in-laws insisted on covering most of it. Their gift to the happy couple, they said. I felt relieved and a little inadequate, but I pushed those feelings down. This was her day. I just wanted her to be happy. 2 weeks before the wedding, my daughter called me during her lunch break. We talked about the final details, the seating arrangements, the music. Everything seemed normal. We laughed about her being nervous, about her fiancé forgetting the ring during the rehearsal. Then she said she had another call coming in and would call me back later. She never hung up. I was at my kitchen table, phone on speaker while I ate a sandwich, when I heard her voice again. She must have accidentally started a 3-way call, or her phone malfunctioned. I was about to call out to her when I heard the other woman's voice. The future mother-in-law was discussing last-minute details. The flowers, the photographer's timing, the cocktail hour arrangements. Then she said something about the seating chart, and her voice dropped into that conspiratorial tone people use when they're about to say something cruel. She hoped I wasn't coming to the wedding. She said there was no room for a man built like a truck. She laughed, this tinkling, awful laugh, and said the photographer would have a hard time getting flattering shots with me in them. She suggested that maybe I could develop a sudden illness, something that would keep me away without causing drama. I sat frozen, sandwich forgotten, waiting for my daughter to defend me, waiting for her to shut this down immediately. Instead, she laughed. That same laugh I'd heard 1,000 times throughout her childhood, when she was pleased or amused. She told her future mother-in-law that her wish was her command. She said she'd been trying to figure out how to handle the situation, and maybe this was the perfect solution. She could tell me the venue had capacity issues, that they'd had to make hard choices about the guest list. They talked for another 5 minutes. About how much better the photos would look. About how her fiancé's family friends wouldn't have to pretend to be comfortable around someone like me. About how the head table would look more elegant without me taking up so much space. My daughter agreed with everything. Contributed ideas. Made jokes at my expense. I hung up before I heard anything else. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. 26 years of sacrifice, of love, of being everything she needed, reduced to an embarrassment. A problem to be managed. Something to hide on her special day. I didn't cry. I'd cried enough when my wife died, and I'd learned that tears don't change anything. But something inside me broke. Something that couldn't be fixed with apologies or explanations. I sat at that kitchen table for 3 hours, thinking, planning. I'm not an impulsive man. Construction teaches you patience, teaches you that the right preparation makes all the difference. So I prepared. The next morning, I made the first call. My daughter's fiancé worked for an investment firm downtown. His boss was a man named Richard, someone I'd done extensive renovation work for 5 years ago. We'd gotten along well. He appreciated quality craftsmanship and paid promptly. More importantly, he remembered me. I called Richard and asked if we could meet for coffee. He agreed immediately, probably curious why his former contractor was reaching out after all this time. We met at a cafe near his office, and I told him I needed to share some information about one of his employees. I explained that I'd accidentally overheard some concerning conversations about financial irregularities, that I wasn't sure if it was serious, but thought he should know. I didn't lie. I'd overheard the fiancé on a previous visit to their apartment, talking to a colleague about creative accounting for a client's portfolio. Nothing I could prove, nothing concrete enough for legal trouble, but enough to raise red flags for an employer already dealing with increased regulatory scrutiny. Richard's firm had been in the news 6 months earlier for a minor compliance issue, and I knew they were being extra careful. Richard thanked me gravely and said he'd look into it. I could see the gears turning in his head. In finance, even the hint of impropriety is poison. The second call was to the venue. I'd paid my deposit months ago for my portion of the rehearsal dinner. I called the event coordinator and explained that due to family circumstances, I needed to cancel. I was very apologetic, very understanding about the cancellation fee. Then I casually mentioned that I'd heard rumors the venue was having problems with their liquor license, that some guests at a recent event had complained about underage serving. This was also true. My daughter had mentioned it herself weeks ago, laughing about drama at someone else's wedding. The venue was already on edge about it, already dealing with an investigation. My call was just another voice raising concerns. The coordinator became defensive immediately, and I smoothly backed off, saying I was sure it was just rumors, that I trusted their professionalism completely. But I could hear the panic in her voice. I'd been in business long enough to know that one more complaint, one more hint of trouble, could tip the scales. Then I waited. 3 days later, my daughter called me. She sounded stressed, but was trying to hide it. She asked if I'd heard from the venue about anything. I said no, asked what was wrong. She told me there was some confusion about permits and licensing, that the venue was being extra cautious and had suggested they postpone the date. She was upset but trying to stay positive, talking about finding a new date, maybe pushing things back a month or two. I made sympathetic noises and asked if there was anything I could do to help. 2 days after that, she called again. This time she was crying. Her fiancé's firm had put him on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. She didn't understand what was happening. He was telling her it was all a misunderstanding, that someone had raised questions about his work that were completely unfounded. She was scared and confused, and she needed her dad. I drove to her apartment, held her while she cried, told her everything would be okay. Her fiancé was there, pacing like a caged animal, furious and frightened in equal measure. He kept saying it was sabotage, that someone was out to get him. He had no idea who or why. I stayed for 2 hours, being the supportive father, the rock she'd always relied on. When I left, I told her to call me if she needed anything. Anything at all. The next week was chaos. The venue officially pulled out, citing issues they needed to resolve before hosting events. The fiancé's investigation deepened. Turns out Richard found several questionable transactions once he started looking closely. Nothing criminal, but enough to damage a career. Enough to make a young finance professional toxic in a tight-knit industry. The wedding fell apart piece by piece. The stress fractured the relationship. The future mother-in-law blamed my daughter for bringing bad luck, which was rich considering she'd been the one mocking me. The fiancé started drinking more, became irritable and distant. My daughter tried to hold it together, but I could see her crumbling. She never once mentioned the seating chart conversation, never brought up her concerns about me attending. She called me regularly, needing support, needing her father to tell her it would all work out. I played my part perfectly. 3 weeks ago, what should have been the wedding day, my daughter showed up at my house. No warning, no call ahead. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. The engagement was off. The fiancé had accepted a job in another state, desperate to escape the stigma. They'd agreed it wasn't working, that the stress had revealed incompatibilities they'd ignored. She collapsed on my couch and cried for hours. I made her tea, ordered her favorite takeout, let her talk through everything. She said she didn't understand how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. She said she felt cursed, like God was punishing her for something. I almost told her then. Almost explained exactly what she was being punished for. But I held back. There was something satisfying about her not knowing. About her attributing her pain to random bad luck rather than consequences. Update 1. It's been 2 days since I posted this, and I'm adding an update because something happened that I need to share. My daughter came over yesterday evening. She brought dinner, my favorite barbecue from the place we used to go when she was in high school, and she seemed different. Calmer, maybe, or resigned. We ate in relative silence, just casual conversation about her new job search and my current project at work. After dinner, she helped me clean up, and then she sat down across from me at the kitchen table. She had this look on her face I couldn't quite read. She told me she'd been doing a lot of thinking about everything that happened. About the wedding falling apart, about her relationship ending, about her entire life being upended. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. She said she'd been replaying all the conversations leading up to the wedding collapse, trying to understand the timing. She mentioned how strange it was that everything fell apart so quickly after that call with her future mother-in-law. My heart started pounding, but I kept my face neutral. I asked her what she meant. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said she'd checked her phone records and found that call, the one where she forgot to hang up, the one where she and her future mother-in-law had talked about me not coming to the wedding. She saw that the call had lasted much longer than she remembered. She realized I must have heard everything. The silence stretched between us like a canyon. I didn't confirm or deny it. I just sat there, looking at the daughter I'd raised alone, the girl I'd sacrificed everything for, and waited. She started crying. Not the dramatic, desperate crying from before. This was different. Quieter. She said she knew what she'd done was unforgivable. She said she'd been so caught up in trying to impress her fiancé's family, trying to fit into their world, that she'd lost herself. She said the moment those words left her mouth, she'd felt sick, but she'd been too cowardly to take them back. She asked me if I'd caused everything that happened. The venue issues. Her fiancé's job problems. The wedding falling apart. I finally spoke. I told her I'd made 2 phone calls. That's all. 2 phone calls sharing information that was already true, just bringing certain facts to the attention of people who needed to know them. I didn't lie, didn't fabricate anything. I just moved some pieces on the board. She nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. She said she deserved it. She said she deserved worse than what happened. She asked me if I could ever forgive her. That's when I told her the truth. I said forgiveness wasn't the issue. Trust was. I'd spent 26 years being the person she could always count on, the one who would never let her down, who would always put her first. And she'd thrown that away for the approval of people who didn't matter, who saw her as nothing more than an accessory to their son. I told her I'd heard her laugh at their jokes about me. I'd heard her excitement at the idea of excluding me from her wedding. And that sound, her laughing at my expense, was something I'd never forget. She kept apologizing over and over. She said she wanted to make it right, wanted to prove she was better than the person she'd become. She asked me what she could do. I told her the truth. I said I didn't know if there was anything she could do, that some betrayals cut too deep to heal, that I'd always be her father, always help her if she truly needed it. But the relationship we'd had was gone. She'd killed it with her laughter on that phone call. She left an hour later, still crying. Before she walked out the door, she turned back and said she loved me, that she'd always loved me, even when she was too stupid to show it. I told her I loved her too. Because I do. You don't stop loving your child, no matter what they do. But love doesn't mean trust. Love doesn't erase hurt. Love doesn't rebuild what's been destroyed. I'm writing this update because people asked if I felt satisfied with my revenge, if I felt like justice had been served. Honestly, I feel empty, hollow. I proved I could hurt the person who hurt me. I demonstrated that disrespecting me had consequences. But my daughter is still devastated, still dealing with the wreckage of her life, and I'm still sitting in this house alone, just like I have been for the last 20 years. The difference is that now, I'm truly alone. Before, I always had her. Even when she was busy with her own life, I had the knowledge that I'd raised someone who loved me, who valued me, who would always have my back. Now I don't even have that illusion. Update 2. A month has passed since my last update. I'm adding this because the story has continued to evolve in ways I didn't expect, and I feel like I owe it to everyone who invested time in reading this to share where things stand now. My daughter and I have been meeting for coffee every Saturday morning. It started 3 weeks ago when she texted me asking if we could talk. Not at my house, not at hers, somewhere neutral. We've been going to this diner halfway between our places, the same booth by the window each time. The first meeting was awkward, painful. She didn't try to explain away what she'd done or make excuses. She just talked about how she'd been going to therapy, working through why she'd been so desperate for her fiancé's family's approval that she'd betrayed the one person who'd never betrayed her. She told me her therapist had helped her understand that she'd been carrying guilt about her mother's death. Not rational guilt. She was 6 years old when it happened, but the kind of magical thinking children do. She'd somehow convinced herself that she wasn't enough, that if she'd been a better daughter, maybe her mother would have fought harder to stay alive. That guilt had morphed into a constant need to prove herself worthy, to earn love rather than accept it as freely given. Her fiancé's wealthy, judgmental family had represented the ultimate test. If she could make them accept her, approve of her, she could finally prove she was valuable. I listened to all this without saying much. Part of me understood. Part of me didn't care about her psychological reasoning. Understanding why she hurt me didn't make the hurt disappear. But I kept showing up every Saturday. I don't know why exactly. Maybe because, despite everything, she's still my daughter. Maybe because I'm tired of being angry. Maybe because I recognized something in her pain that mirrored my own. During our fourth meeting, she told me she'd reached out to her ex-fiancé's mother. She'd told her off, apparently. Called her out for her cruelty, for her elitism, for poisoning what should have been a happy time. She said she didn't care about burning that bridge because it was a bridge that led nowhere she wanted to go. She also told me she'd been volunteering at a community center, helping with a program for kids who'd lost parents. She said being around those children, seeing their grief and resilience, had reminded her of what she'd had, a father who'd stepped up and filled 2 roles without complaint. I asked her if this was all some elaborate apology tour, if she was just doing what she thought would make me forgive her faster. She looked me dead in the eye and said maybe it started that way, but it had become something more. She said she'd spent her whole adult life trying to become someone impressive enough to make up for being motherless, someone polished enough to hide the rough edges of her working-class upbringing. She'd been ashamed of where she came from, ashamed of me, because I represented everything she thought she needed to escape. Now, she said, she was ashamed of the person she'd become. Last Saturday, our conversation took a different turn. She asked me about her mother. Really asked, in a way she hadn't since she was a teenager. She wanted to know about their relationship, about what her mother was like before the cancer, about the life we'd had. I found myself talking for over 2 hours. About meeting her mother at a community college class we'd both taken. About how she'd loved terrible horror movies and could fix anything mechanical. About how she'd been tougher than anyone I'd ever met, even at the end. About how she would have been so proud of the daughter we'd raised, but also disappointed in the choices that daughter had made. My daughter cried through most of it. She said she barely remembered her mother beyond vague impressions and photographs. She said she'd been so focused on missing having a mother that she'd forgotten to appreciate having me. I'm not going to pretend everything is fixed. It's not. There are still moments when I remember her laughing on that phone call, and I feel the anger rise up again. There are still nights when I lie awake wondering if I can ever truly trust her again. But something has shifted. Maybe it's just time passing, dulling the sharp edges of betrayal. Maybe it's seeing her genuinely trying to be better, not just for me, but for herself. Maybe I'm just tired of carrying this weight. 2 days ago, she called me in the evening. No special reason, she said. She just wanted to hear my voice. We talked about nothing important, her job interviews, my latest project, a funny video she'd seen online. Before we hung up, she told me she loved me. I told her I loved her too. And this time, I almost meant it the way I used to. I don't know where we go from here. I don't know if we'll ever get back to the relationship we had before. Maybe we shouldn't. Maybe that relationship had its own problems, its own unhealthy dynamics that I'm only now starting to see. But for the first time in months, I feel like maybe we're building something new. Something more honest. Something where she sees me as I actually am and I see her as she actually is, flaws and all. To everyone who said I should cut her off completely, that she didn't deserve a second chance, I understand where you're coming from. Maybe you're right. Maybe I'm being weak or foolish. But she's my daughter. And despite everything she did, despite the hurt she caused, I can't turn off 26 years of love. The wedding never happened. The relationship I thought we had died that day. But maybe, Slowly, something else can grow in its place. Or maybe I'm just a sentimental old fool who can't let go. Either way, this is where we are. Not forgiven, not forgotten, but trying to find a way forward through the wreckage.